So they're moving up the scheduled B&R slightly because they recognize it's a problem, but that's still a month and a half away, so why not just ban the cards that are a problem? An article was just released yesterday talking about the shift in scheduling for the next B&R, addressing all competitive formats. But as I alluded to, there are some problems with this announcement. The idea of a lame duck format in standard, the surprise to some people that Vivi might actually be taking the hit instead of Agatha Soul Cauldron, and all that in between. Let's go over not only the announcement, but the current health of all 1v1 60 card constructed formats in Magic the Gathering. Two things before we move on. Do y'all prefer the camera down here or like up above as I usually have it? I'm just trying something new. Let me know in the comment section. But second thing before we hop into the main topic is that you know how Ultra Pro usually handles all the official product launches for Wizards of the Coast? They are officially licensed, like they did all the Final Fantasy product. They have like really cool stuff here, like these deck boxes and these binders, super sweet stuff. So Ultra Pro dropped the bag, and I have it from a notable source a little while ago as to when they actually canceled their orders or all shipping to all the LGSs and everything. So we were just kind of left out of nowhere with no product. And then, you know, with the quick turnaround, goes to show that Ultra Pro dropped the bag and Gamegenic picked that crap up and dunked it, baby. Like, it looks like Gamegenic is able to make such an insanely quick turnaround on this. So the speculation here is that the product exists in Ultra Pro's side, like with the Ultra Pro branding, but it will probably all be burned unless some like employee manages to like steal one or something and the Pinkertons get sent after them. An Ultra Pro box with Spider-Man on there probably exists, but for now we have Gamegenic kind of distributing all this, unless it's how they're making it might be slightly different in terms of like how it matches up to my guess, but I'm assuming the production is handled separately by Gamegenic, not that it goes from one place to Ultra Pro or one place to Gamegenic and they can switch it up there. But regardless, Ultra Pro dropped the ball. Let's hop on to our main topic on standard, moving the banned and restricted announcement to November 10th. So as we see lower down in this article, as with the previous B&Rs and as has been for a little while now with our banned and restricted announcements, we've been getting a set date upcoming that will be the next time any movement happens in the majority of formats, barring any emergency situations. And they said so specifically with standard, they want to reduce the amount of times that they make changes, as this is a rotating format. It already has a lot of variance in that aspect. And so they don't want to create more churn in a non-eternal format or a non kind of long-term format like Modern or Pioneer that technically doesn't meet the eternal definition. November 24th to November 10th is the shift. So up by 14 days, 2 whole weeks to help us out here. And when it comes to that, there's a lot to be said about the viability of Vivi and Agatha independently of each other, the power of both of those cards. I've seen a lot of creators talk about how, you know, they believe Agatha is the problem or they believe Vivi is the problem. And I think like both of them have their merit. It all kind of comes down to how long you believe Agatha Soul Cauldron is kind of legal and standard. And it seems like based on this article, I'm not going to go through just kind of a lot of these like beginning points here. We're going to go over kind of maybe the points later, but really what it comes down to is they want to have a conversation about Vivi and Agatha. And really where the article leans is on taking action on Vivi Ornithir. The action is going to be on Vivi. And there might be something on Agatha. So what that tells me as a creator and what it likely should tell you as a viewer is that Vivi is likely going to be banned and Agatha's will not be touched. And by extension, there likely is not something upcoming within the rotation of standard to which Agatha Soul Cauldron is legal that will break Agatha Soul Cauldron. There is likely not a activated ability that could go into a graveyard, that could go onto other creatures, that is necessarily broken. The other thing that we can also kind of surmise from this is that the tinfoil hat theories about how Square Enix and the Final Fantasy publishers and the dealings that they have aren't necessarily tied to no bans. Like Final Fantasy just came out later this year, or earlier this year, less than a year later. If we take action on Vivi Ornithir, if this article is true and they don't do a switcheroo on us, then that means that they're, you know, they can ban things if they become problematic. There is a clause there, and they're not held to some type of contract to keep all Final Fantasy cards legal for whatever reason, which is a good thing. I think we can eliminate those tinfoil hat theories. Now that opens up for me again if they end up banning Agatha, not Vivi. I'm going to be completely honest. It completely opens up for me. In my personal opinion, I believe Vivi is the problem and it's not Agatha Soul Cauldron. Before this, Agatha was barely playable. I remember, as someone who's been long-term looking to get into Painter in Legacy, Agatha Soul Cauldron was like $20 to $30. It shot up so much more. It blew through the amount of credit that I was saving to get it. I should have gotten it back then, but of course, who is going to be here to protect Vivi Ornithir? Sad life, lost some money there. But regardless, that is the life of a Magic player trying to play many 1v1 60 card constructed formats. But you know, they want to discuss some reasons as to why they're not taking action now, which is there is some criticism on some of this. So what we're not going to do is create a previously unannounced emergency ban window in the middle of an RCQ season, though it's worth noting that we have seen the calls for it and discussed it. Ultimately, we opted to stick more or less to what we've said. And so, yeah, it's 2 weeks up, but more or less they're sticking to their guns. One of the aforementioned RCQ players who have taken their time, effort, and money to travel, schedule events, it undermines their stated goals. And I think this is an important thing out there to state that to look after these players going to these events, you want to create reliability in the constructed environments that you have. Design is a whole separate thing, and it's a hard thing to balance. One thing I will say is, for people that are looking at prices of Vivi, it will likely not bottom out much further. There will be a mass sellout closer to the time because this article right here, we will likely be taking action in November. Vivi is warping standard format and likely needs to go. So as I mentioned, there's likely an action being taken on Vivi. A lot of people will sell out of Vivi. And so if you're looking for supply, maybe at your LGS, maybe it's low or whatever it is, it will bottom out a little bit more, but not much more. So for example, I'm making up numbers here, but if the card is $50 right now, and it very well could be based on my previous videos, but $50, it might not go down to like 30. It might go down like 40, 45. It might not bottom out too much more, but to be fair, standard is where it sees the most play, so it might just do that. There is a lot of excitement for it in the commander format, but past that, there isn't too much play, although, you know, arguably formats like Pioneer just aren't too explored, so maybe there is a Vivi deck there. It's just not a lot of people are brewing at the moment for a format like that. We're unsure about Agatha Soul Cauldron, but also do think the format has reached its final form, which gives us the clearest direction on standard kind of long term. So just a few years ago, we tried to give ourselves flexibility on ban, and it just led to a lot of chaos, which is fine. Vivi is the clear outlier, although, you know, kind of right here, you know, Vivi Cauldron decks have taken a spotlight of a disproportionate amount of the metagame, but recently players have found a version of mono red that is rebalancing the scales. This has actually led to, it's not Hellkite Tyrant, it's Nova Hellkite, that has actually risen in price. The 5 mana haste flying 4/5 that you can warp in for 3 that enters and deals 1 damage. The 1 damage is actually relevant against certain cards in the metagame. There are a non-zero amount of X1s that do see a significant amount of play, and so the 1 damage is actually great for blowouts. The card is good. It's actually risen in price because of something like this, and so a lot of people are getting a little bit of kind of relapse, I guess, on their addictions to mono red. Maybe PTSD if you're on the other side of it, but mono red is definitely coming up. A lot of people are thinking that, you know, right now this is where the metagame is going to stick. We now have a new mono red deck that gained in popularity thanks to our recent tournaments. Vivi is still up there. We have a lot of the same kind of sticking around points. I guess maybe this is a symptom of maybe more people playing removal, but to be fair, we saw in those recent environments that a lot of people are going to be at the top with high conversion rates with Vivi Ornithir, but that might just be a sampling issue that we have to recognize, that a lot of people thought Vivi was the best deck, but that could also be incorrect in a sea where other people are playing Vivi. So it could be a bias where a lot of people share a unified view that Vivi is the best, but Vivi could also be uniquely very bad against a specific deck that maybe didn't convert too well or did bad. And maybe that deck also has a bad matchup against mono red, because a lot of people, maybe that is the deck, but maybe a lot of people believe mono red was the answer. And ultimately was. It ultimately did end up beating Vivi in one of our recent standard tournaments. And so there's all these kind of factors that come in. We have to be very careful with how we sample things from a limited group of tournaments, although our 5-0 listings and everything do matter. But, you know, from here, they talk about how, you know, we believe standard may be hurt in the short term by 1 or 2 dominant decks. Long term, it is certainly hurt by banning decks out from under players in a surprise move. So again, doubling down on the fact that they don't want to they want to keep confidence in people's abilities to play certain decks, but really what this means is likely if you're on Arena, you can probably get away with crafting 4 copies of Vivi. You will be getting those wildcard backs at some point, but of course a lot of the cards in those decks don't necessarily translate over 1 for 1 into something else, so be very careful as to what you're kind of crafting there. Fourth and finally, while we acknowledge the high-level competitive standard is lopsided, the majority of standard play is not. The MTG Arena ladder isn't nearly this distorted, and in-store play isn't nearly this distorted. So I'm curious what they're getting from in-store play. I'm assuming that's maybe 1Ks, 5Ks, whatever, like local tournaments that report their top 8s, top 16s. So that could be something interesting as well. That also might, again, have a bias towards a reduced number of people playing paper standard. A lot of people might be playing standard for the sake of the RCQ season and going into just play at a tournament level to qualify and everything. And so it's going to have distorted numbers, right? Like people are going to come in, there's going to be the enfranchised people that want to win and are going to play the top decks. They're playing Vivi. There's going to be the other people that come in and try and dark horse the crap out of it and try and come in as an underdog. I hope I'm using that analogy correctly with dark horse, but they come in as an underdog and try and beat out the Vivi deck with their brew of their own. And maybe that brew is some type of high cost deck. Maybe it is a little bit more budget. Standard's in a weird place when it comes to paper play. And so quoting the arena ladder, I think I also have a problem with, because the metagames are completely different. It's hard to take Magic Online data right now because the amount of people that are potentially double queuing in Magic Online leagues and the lack of good data in challenges and everything, just a lack of people playing standard online. It also leads to the fact that the metagames are completely different. So you're comparing Magic Arena to paper, not even bringing up MTGO, kind of shows me that there probably isn't a lot of data on that at all. And so I think there's just a lot of problems with the sampling here, but it is still worth noting. It is the data that we have. We have to list it with the acknowledgement of the errors that are there. It's not up to maybe the article to post it, but I do want to kind of mention it and acknowledge it. There's a balance to be struck between things are fine with most play and things are unstable at high level competitive play, because what's important there is also the vocal minority voice. We've seen this time and time again, where a lot of people believe in general that a format can be fine. We've seen this happen with Modern, sometimes a little bit in Legacy as well. A lot of our favorite formats where we have a certain sentiment with something, but the vocal minority on Reddit, on Twitter, and everything, like all these people have a very skewed view of things, and people can dogpile on each other. A group mentality can start to form, because on average, if you're posting on Reddit about Magic, if you're posting on Twitter about Magic and getting views and people are seeing you, you are probably more enfranchised than the average person. If you are not a content creator, you are likely someone that plays a ton of Magic, if not grinds Magic at a competitive level. And so you are going to have a view that matches this and not necessarily maybe the average view. That's again something worth acknowledging as well. High level play gets the headlines and clicks, but everyday experience is also important. So it's not to again say that Vivi or Cauldron isn't the problem. I just feel like there's been a lot of focus on what's been going on standard. I feel like there's a lot of focus on standard by people that don't play a lot of standard or have a skewed view of standard. So for example, they might be playing standard primarily on Arena, but they're not playing standard in paper. They might not be seeing what's going on the MTGO challenges or leagues. And again, that's a whole different data set alongside paper, alongside Arena, and blah, blah, blah. But this means the flip side of the current story could also be true. High level play can appear balanced, but we can also take action if everyday play isn't engaging. That's not the current situation, but it's something to keep in mind. Before we go, I'd like to note that we focus mostly on standard here, but November 10th announcement will encapsulate all the usual formats we talk about in our update. So again, this article focuses on standard. Not that an upcoming announcement will focus on standard. This article focuses on standard. November 10th will encapsulate all formats. So again, going over this, there's a lot of biases to acknowledge in the data that we're using. I personally believe Vivi is the problem. It should go. And again, there isn't some tinfoil hat theory about how Final Fantasy is going to be this great monolith of a being through Square Enix that is going to develop a contract with Wizards of the Coast where Vivi and its other cards can't be banned whatsoever. So I think that helps. Of course, that whole stipulation goes away if they do ban Agatha's Soul Cauldron, because I personally believe Agatha's Soul Cauldron is not the problem. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that down below. One more thing I want to bring up is the fact that this announcement pretty much just ruins the ability for stores to probably move Vivi. It's probably not going to sell. A lot of people are probably just going to be frustrated because November 10th is just around the corner. It is early to mid-September at this point. You have a month and a half, Spider-Man upcoming as well. A lot of people are just not going to be focused on standard, especially with this announcement, especially with Spider-Man coming out. I think this takes the wind underneath the sails of the format in general. I think it's just worth banning it at this point. I think a lot of action was thought of a little too late, even though it's mid RCQ season. And as much as the integrity of it feels, it was better to just not say anything almost. Like, it's better to acknowledge this, I think, later down the line and just be careful with your wording. But when you come out with an announcement like this, I will applaud transparency. I think communication is great, but you have to be careful with what you're communicating. As someone in the corporate world myself, you have to be very careful with your wording and what that means and how that can be interpreted. And I just feel like, again, I don't think anyone's going to be coming in to be playing paper standard. RCQ attendance is just going to be willing to go down. So I think a lot of people, if you're looking to qualify and attend RCQs, they're going to be easier than ever closer to the time now. A lot of people are going to be selling out now and not bothering. So there's just gonna be a lot less competition in general. A lot of people just trying to get their money as Vivi goes down in price slowly over time and just recoup some of it for a future standard format and other formats whatsoever. So it's kind of sad to see. I think action should have been taken a lot sooner if this is the sentiment, but let's just head into other formats. It's just, I'm happy they communicated again. It just rubs me the wrong way. But those are my thoughts on standard. When it comes to the Pioneer metagame, I think, again, this is a very underexplored format. I sincerely believe that Simic Scapeshift is a top 5 deck in Pioneer. And if the metagame was to adapt to Simic Scapeshift being up there, the amount of times I'm able to just get people with Lumra, and again, I should acknowledge my bias here of primarily playing on Arena, which is a vastly different metagame than in paper than MTGO. It's so easy to get people with Lumra in Pioneer. You don't need the crumbling vestige whatsoever, although it helps. And the way the metagame would adapt, to my estimation, this is all subjective views here, to my estimation, that metagame would actually shift mono red down. If more people realize that Simic Scapeshift was as powerful as it is quite literally just Amulet Titan in Pioneer, the closest it can be. It is a Lumra, where is it? I'm just trying to think of the card right now. Lumra Aftermath Analyst. There you go. It's a Lumra Aftermath Analyst combo deck that loops a bunch of its cards and loops a bunch of its lands and ultimately wins through either milling out your opponent, dealing damage to your opponent through like pings on a land ETBing, or through just Thassa's Oracle. There are so many ways that you can build a deck. That combo is actually really resilient. It top decks really well. It honestly really does top deck really well, and it has really clean instant speed answers to a lot of what the format has. And again, if the format wants to overcorrect for something like this, it really can. It has the options for it, and I think that would shift mono red down, but Pioneer is just really underexplored right now. I think if you wanted to get into Pioneer, now is the best time to do so. A lot of cards in general are very low cost. They're very affordable right now in general because of the lack of focus. People just aren't buying Pioneer cards or focusing on it. Get into the format, play it. I think it's, as much as I don't like it, I think there is potential in this format. I've really come around to Pioneer in general. Because of Scapeshift's combo specifically. I technically can qualify it as a mill deck because Ipnu Rivulet is a win condition. So I will accept it. I will accept it. Pioneer, for all my haters that have been watching me for a while, I've turned my opinion around on Pioneer. And I think this format actually is savable if people realize Simic Scapeshift is that good. It will shift mono red down, have the other interactive decks be closer up at the top. There's something to be said about how powerful black is and the power of Thoughtseize and removal. But that's a deeper discussion down the line. When it comes to modern, I'm actually like pretty chill on modern. I play about like 10 games somewhere. Yeah, probably 10 to 15 games of Modern a week, right? Somewhere in that range. That is through a combination of maybe like paper testing, paper play, or mostly Magic Online. And so through those, I have a generally like good opinion about Modern in general, even though my favorite deck, Modern Mill, isn't good at the top right now. I think there is a good amount of variance at the top. Boros Energy isn't as highly represented, recognizing the fact there always has to be a best deck in the format, but I think every archetype gets an equal representation. We can see that in the percentages, but also just in terms of viability. As long as Boros Energy is at the top, the combo decks are going to have their viability. Affinity is actually back in a very big way thanks to Pinnacle Emissary, and Quantum Riddler has really just breathe new life into blue as a mid-range color, not just a combo color or a control color. And so, you know, big shout out to Edge of Eternities for giving us just a really big insert into Modern. I think that format or that set has had a big impact on this format, and that's really great to see just from a standard set in general. And it's just nice to see that we even have a aggro burn deck. You know, it may not be burn in the traditional sense of like Boros Charms and lightning bolts and lava spikes, but it is aggro in the sense of tribal flames and creatures beating down. We have a reanimator deck, which is graveyard based. We sometimes plays Faithless Looting. It really is arguably the worst card in that deck in terms of like how it wants to tempo out and use its mana. Again, combo deck at the top, big mana Eldrazi available. So it has that Tron vibe to it. You have another graveyard combo deck. Again, mid-range aggro combo, big mana control in some ways. Like Azorius control is here, not super representative, but in my mind, anything that plays Psychic Frog is probably some level of freaking control, although it's probably just a mid-range all-star at this point. A lot of things are represented in this format, and I think it's actually relatively balanced. Let me know if I'm like off basis whatsoever, but it feels like Modern is actually pretty diverse. It actually might be in a really good state. If they do change something out of energy, I won't be mad. I do hate that deck to a passion still. I freaking hate the idea of like Guide of Souls openers and Ocelot Pride into a Johnny. Like they're all messed up Magic cards. Together, separately, they're fine. It's just when they come together in siloed design. This is Modern Horizons 3 deck, of course. So this is the representation of our rotating, sub-rotating format. Bigger issues, but I think in general, the format has been able to self-correct in its own ways. When it comes to Pauper, another format that I believe is honestly in the best place that it's been in a really, really long time. A lot of the top of the metagame is highly interactive. Madness, Burn, and Burn do exist at a number, and there are aggro shells. But Jund Wildfires, which is literally the closest thing to like 2015 Modern Jund that you're going to get anywhere right now. It is the closest representation to it. It is highly interactive. It draws cards. It plays threats that are low to the ground, and even like bigger threats as well. Jund Wildfires is such a good mid-range deck. Blue Terror, Mono Blue Fairies, similar type of control decks, but similar type of control styles, I should say, but one wants to play a tempo shell with like a bunch of Death by 1,000 Needles and like fairies poking at you, whereas the other one just wants to slam like 5/5s and 5/6s that are like 1 cost or 2 cost, and then just win through the back of interaction and counter spells. Now, both of these, they have their own ways to interact with the board. Blue Terror looks to just win you out on combat. Blue Fairies can interact with you in terms of bounce spells, countering, and just getting in unblockable threats to just quote unquote confirm damage. Again, highly interactive, like top of the metagame right now. The big outlier is High Tide Combo. Now, combo exists in the format. Their Tron is a soft combo deck, but can act as big mana. Grixis Affinity is like a tempo aggro deck. You have tempo, you have mid-range control, big mana, combo. You have it all. You have it all. Bogles is even a viable strategy right now. Dredge is still viable, even with like the amount of graveyard hate in the format. It's like Leyline of the Void isn't a thing. It's not like you have the shutout cards. You have like Fairy Macabre and stuff. But like those graveyard decks then have the answers to said decks as well. So again, the representation is there like Modern. The problem is High Tide Combo because it has a play pattern like Eggs where it can take a while to almost come to a non-deterministic win. And honestly, shout out to Calicay's Pauper content creator. I just feel like High Tide is up this high because my man just keeps like succeeding with it. I swear I see that guy tweeting about like 5-0s and 10-0s and 50-0s like all the time with High Tide. My man's a High Tide master. So I feel like this is like over representation because of him and his minions. But high tide combo up at the top here because of that play pattern and that frustration of not being able to answer it for certain decks. It's up there, and they specifically talked about how they're gonna decide if high tide is gonna get banned again. I'm kind of leaning on the fact that it might. I think a lot of people are frustrated by its play pattern, but I think its place in the metagame actually opens up room for other decks. Like the spy combo deck, it opens up room for that. For the aggro decks as well that are faster, it can help answer that as well. And in terms of the top of the metagame, like Jund Wildfires, Mono Blue Fairies, and Blue Terror, generally speaking, have a really good matchup against high tide combo, or at least in my experience, have a really good matchup against this from the content I've watched, from the little bit I've tried of them. Again, I'm mostly a spy and affinity player, but against a little bit I've tried against them, they have a really good matchup, just being able to disrupt, grab pieces from whatever the board. They're not playing to the board, but like disrupt stuff from hand. Jund Wildfires is going to be able to put a clock on them, but also Mono Blue Fairies just countering anything, Blue Terror countering anything, plus putting on a really fast clock on them. A lot of good things happen at the top of the metagame. Pauper's really good, like Modern right now, which makes me really happy. My two favorite formats up at the top. Legacy's in an interesting place. I think a lot of people were thinking in closer to the beginning of the last B&R, especially myself, that Oops All Spells was still something that needed a correction. And I think that's still true. There is something to be said about that, but it's not necessarily as much of a problem as it is the fact that, you know, we have Eternal Weekend coming up. And right now, the big topic of discussion is Tamiyo Inquisitive Student. They have banned stuff out of the Dimir shell for over a year at this point, and they haven't been able to solve anything. And to be fair, it's been powerful card after powerful card after powerful card, right? Like Grief died, Psychic Frog died, you then had your next best reanimator target in Troll of Khazad-dûm. Like, so many cards are going from this shell. It just feels like Dimir Reanimator, or just the Dimir shell in general, is just not going anywhere. Excuse me. And Tamiyo Inquisitive Student is just like one of the best things to do as a mid-range option. It stops all the weenie creatures with its +1 once it flips. You're in a brainstorm format, so you can flip this like really easily. I even made a short where I made a wild overcorrection. I was like, yeah, this card sucks. It does nothing. It really depends on the metagame factors that you are playing against. If you're making a bunch of weenie creatures, doesn't matter. You're not beating a Tamiyo +1. It's minus just being able to recur draw spells or options that you have against specific things. And then once it ultimates, it's pretty game winning. Like drawing half your deck will pretty much confirm that you can find your way to a win. It being in a forcible day shell, having the quote unquote instant wins in the reanimator shells of Entomb Reanimate. That's what like Legacy has been for a while. And it's really feast or famine on if you have a preference for it, where a lot of decks now can't play like a hard control plan, a hard aggro plan. Like you really need like an I win button in some way. And so that's why decks like Lands, they do have their place, but it can be tough. Like the Epic Storm has a little bit more of like a better time in my opinion than like something like Lands might. But having like Eldrazi and Mono Red and stuff like that makes sense because you have fast packages, Soul Lands alongside Disruption like Chalice of the Void, Mono Red having Blood Moon and the stop that is like the One Ring. Like it has these big stops that it can then tempo out from, but everything else is largely just like a combo deck or a blue shell. I should also shout out the fact that Ocelot Pride midrange is literally a mono white like token aggro deck that came out off the back of the energy package from Modern Horizons 3, combining with the warp package that you get from Halia and I think it's like Starfield something. I did a video on it last week, but one other card from Edge of Eternities that tutors or gets for a land, tutors for a 1-drop or gets a land. Both of those coming together into a mono white shell. The recent episode of the Eternal Glory podcast was talking about potentially bringing back a traditional board wipe into the format, because this deck can honestly, like, you can reanimate a big target, but this deck just goes wide. A single reanimated target doesn't really do much against a board full of like tokens and a wide board. And so single target removal may actually start to get a lot less. So there are some factors in Legacy that are changing, and Edge of Eternities is like a big reason for that. It was a very powerful in-universe set. So again, just recognizing the change, recognizing that the blue decks generally, yes, they are like mid-range control, but a hard control deck is really hard to do right now because every deck just has a quote unquote I win button on top of their mid-range plan. They're swinging in with Delver, but then they have Corey Steelcutter to just aggro you out of nowhere. They are kind of controlling you with Orcish Bowmasters, but all of a sudden they like reanimate some type of big target after an Entomb, and then you lose from there. Mystic Forge, all in on a combo. Sneak and Show, mid-range, but with a plan to just cheat things in. Painter, which is, if you're ignoring the blue variant, which is slightly different here, but if you're looking at the red variant and even like red-white, largely just like a mid-range deck with an I win button of the Painter combo. Like you see examples of this everywhere. So Legacy's in like a very varied place. It might not be in a good place, especially if you look at like the metagame percentages. I just don't know, like if you ban Tamiyo, is that really the solution? Like I feel like it's not just one card. You need multiple cards, and you kind of almost need an unban. Like what we did to Modern last year, you kind of almost need to do that to Legacy to like really revitalize it. They've talked about how they're like open to doing it. It's just not going to be a common thing. I imagine the focus on Eternal Magic in general outside of like Commander isn't there. Pauper gets a special backing because they have the format panel, which is great, but there are discussions about how there shouldn't be a format panel for Legacy and how there should be. I'm personally on the side of that there should be, but I understand why there shouldn't be and the pushback for it. And I think the arguments are very fair for why there shouldn't be. So Legacy is in a crazy place. I think there should be multiple bans, and I think there should be multiple unbans, again, to revitalize the format. But again, who knows? I'm a Legacy newbie, relatively new into this. You can think of myself as like an outsider view with a little bit of experience, but regardless, that's what I think about kind of Magic and its formats right now. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. How are you feeling about like the Ultra Pro situation, how Gamegenic kind of just yoinked the Spider-Man contract from underneath them? How are you feeling about these change in date and overall feeling about standard and bans? And then finally, how are you feeling about other formats? If you're playing things outside of Commander and Standard, like if you're playing any other 1v1 60 card constructed format, how are you feeling about that format? Do you feel like your favorite format is getting the attention it needs? Or is it just being left to the wayside?